welcome back to our continuation of last week's episode with Ann Hart, past president of the Autism Society of Texas, the mom of a 40-year-old severely autistic son who's been answering questions about autism for 35 years in Florida and in Texas for hundreds, probably thousands of autistic parents. So we're talking about housing. If you missed the first episode, you may want to go back and watch it. It has lots of interesting comments that Ann made, and we're going to continue right now with that discussion and a few more tips and pointers from Ann Hart. Yeah, and I think that's the key. I mean, if the higher the support needs, as Ann's already mentioned, the fewer options that are available. But if your kiddo's fairly independent and verbal, right, can communicate okay, then I think, there's a much broader range of options to consider on this slide. And then if we move over to the next slide, which is the state supporting living centers and some of these other things, these are also perhaps options where you don't necessarily need that one-on-one support. Is there anything, Ann, in particular on this slide that you want to just touch base on?
I think I kind of said it. Right. Well, I think what I want to touch on here, when we talk about the state supported living centers, depending on what you've read, what you've heard, depending who you hang out with, you may think of the SSLCs as like, hell. Sorry, that's too strong. But you may have a very, very negative impression of the state supported living centers. I get it. I totally understand why. We could talk about the history of that. But all I will say is for some of our family members, the SSLC might not be the worst thing that could happen to them. Especially some of the SSLCs have made loads of progress after being kind of audited, and there were some severe problems at some of them, say 20 years ago, or so. Say the Brenham State Supported Living Center, people seem to love that place. I've heard so many good things about the Brenham State Supported Living Center. There are 13 of them. You could look it up, look it up on the HHS website for Texas, find out the closest one. You could start with the closest one where you live. Go visit with an open mind and just see. It's a campus. I think there's some big pluses for our folks, even say somebody like John, who, we don't let him out of the house alone ever. He's not safe. If he were on a campus that he got to know, but he does know his way around. I know he knows his way around our neighborhood. He's demonstrated that he does. If he were on a campus where he became familiar, I think he could go from the dining hall to his dorm without somebody right by him, so that's kind of nice. That would be he'd be more independent in some ways, even though it's counterintuitive because it's an institution. Technically that is an institution, but in certain ways, John could be more independent at a campus-based place than he is in the community, if assuming the right supports were in place and he practiced and all that. You wouldn't just throw him in there. If it is becoming clear to you that the SSLC, for either financial reasons or medical reasons or some other kind of reason, that the SSLC might be looking like what you're looking at, I would say consider it. And if you go visit and say, over my dead body, then back to the but at least don't rule it out before you've given it a chance to talk to the staff, see what supports they have in place. Because and then I'll just stop. The SSLCs didn't always have trained behavior therapists on staff. Now I think they do. They've changed. They've made improvements. So that was just like I said, Marbridge didn't used to really have very many people with autism. Now they do. So they, they're making progress. By our standards, they're making progress. For our people. So that would be the only thing I would say on that slide. Otherwise, just look what's in your area. Check the ICFs. I think I told you, Mike, I was on a webinar with a company that ran ICFs, and I came away. I had gone in with a slightly negative picture of ICFs because of what I'd heard on the street. I left with a very positive impression of ICFs because this man is passionate, he's caring, he knows what he's doing. And I was like, oh, all right, good. I can change my mind about something. That's
no, and I agree. And I think, the on-site visits and the hard questions are super important, what do you do? Or what are some examples of incidents that have occurred? And how you handle that, what are the biggest challenges and how do you handle those? Are you have any residents currently that require a higher level of need that might be along the lines of what a listener's son or daughter would need, and just see how they answer those questions. And if they don't, then of course that's a big red flag. And if they say, oh yeah, we've handled that before, here's how we've handled that situation, to give you a certain level of comfort. Now, the next slide is, I think, sort of a summary slide, affordable options around the state. And there are new programs, as Ann mentioned, that do come up. So again, I would go to AI and enter in, where you're located and see if it can come up with anything else. And then, of course, check them out. But Ann, is there anything on this slide that you have already covered that you want to be sure and mention something about?
I think so. One thing I would say, if you live in Texas, you're listening to this webinar, contact the Autism Society and connect. Connect with us in either a little bit or a lot, but it's a great network, loads of information. We have, we can help you over time. It doesn't have to be this a one and done situation. If you don't live in Texas, and this is a little bit back to what I said before about learn about your waiver system, some states allow much more flexibility of how you use your waiver than we do here in Texas. So there might be, for example, I think this is still true, don't quote me if you live in Ohio, but for a while, I met some people a while back, and you might have met them too, Mike, or I think Kay did, who were running kind of a private group home, like they owned the house with, their daughter and maybe two other women, say, just hypothetically. And the housing and the rent was like handled privately by the parents, but a professional provider staffed it using their Medicaid waiver. Like that, huge. It was a consortium. It was a housing consortium is what the word I'm trying to think of. Yeah. So we don't have that here in Texas. I mean, you would have to be really, really creative to do it that way. And, it would cost you a lot of money. But some states are happy to kind of collaborate with parents to do some kind of hybrid model like that. That's to be a game changer for you. Likewise, some other states have, maybe more campus kind of places that would accommodate more severe behavior challenges. I can tell you that I know of one I've been following since the very inception, Wheatwater Spectrum. Actually, there might even be two in Sonoma, California, that say John Hart, Michael Carr actually probably could get in and go to, but it would cost us a lot of money. But some of their attendant care could be covered with public money. Right. So, that's all I would say about that. If you live in Texas, contact the Autism Society. We'll keep talking. If you don't live in Texas, really do a deep dive on, what you might be able to do creatively.
Yeah, I think we moved twice because of our son. And the first move worked out well while he was in school. It was not a solution for after he left school. The last move, where we had the University of Texas come in and help us set up a home program, and that sort of became the nexus for J13. That really worked well, but it's a big lift, and it helps to have relatives wherever you do move to that are willing to help you out. I wouldn't put this burden on any relative if they're not willing. It certainly could change your relationship with that relative, but if you've got grandparents, for instance, that are willing to help out and they're still able, or an aunt and an uncle, that makes a world of difference besides just the support that particular program might provide. But I do think this next slide is pretty interesting. And Ann mentioned a couple things already that I want to comment on, and then I'll turn it back over to Ann. I think parents' expectations need to align with whatever program you're looking at.
Right.
And here's the understanding. There is no such thing as a perfect program. Right. And if your expectation is you're going to go into some group home and it's always going to be squeaky clean, and there's always going to be somebody right there for your son or daughter, and it's always going to be joyous. I mean, that's not even your own family home environment. So why? Right.
So they're always going to be eating healthy food. Yeah.
Right. So I think the idea that, look, if we have confidence that the staff is always going to be caring and loving, and they're there for the right reasons, right? It's not just a paycheck. And that's one of the problems we had the first place we moved, is that the school was excellent, but we couldn't find enough folks for the after school, the weekend care, all those things that really were there to help out. We found some great people, but we couldn't find enough. And so I think as you consider relocating, or as you look at programs, talking to them about the staff and the training. For instance, in J13, we found the universities that come in like UT and have students that are getting a graduate level degree in special ed or speech or nursing. They're there for the right reason, right? They've already made a commitment to get a graduate level education. They've already sort of set their sights on this career. There are certain communities, like church-based communities, where folks that have a heart in the right place for serving and trying to help. So looking at things like that, in addition to just that specific program, especially before you decide to move, you want something that's sustainable, right? That's not going to just be hey, for the next 5 years, it's great, but then if the executive director leaves or if the board changes, can I still have confidence in that program? for my son or daughter, because I think Ann says something extremely important. You want to set your son up for success or your daughter up for success. So the last thing you want to do is put a John or a Michael in a program and they have a good time for a few years, and then all of a sudden it goes downhill and they got to move. You can't eliminate that possibility, absolutely, but you can certainly be aware and ask the hard questions up front to try to reduce the likelihood of that. But Ann, is there anything on this slide, the preparing for new housing someday, that you'd like to be sure and focus on or mention?
Well, I think the biggest thing here, the slow exit of the solar system. And what she meant by that was you've got to little by little stop being the son, like you're, being the son, and everything revolves around you as a mother or you as a father. And that's an image I could kind of keep with me. If you're listening to this and you have a 10-year-old and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so far away. And, but what you still can be working on, because keep in mind, my experience with people with autism, it takes a lot of repetitions.
Yep.
My children who don't have autism needed practice on stuff, and they didn't necessarily love a new situation either. They wanted to practice, but John really needed a lot of practice. So, even starting at 10 years old, we sent him to overnight camp, and they could accommodate him. We made sure it was a place where they probably were not going to kick him out or send him home. It's from a Sunday afternoon. This is camp that's at the bottom of that list. Camp. He, check-in would be Sunday afternoon at 4. Pickup would be noon on Friday, like not long. We did manage to squeeze in a couple little trips, back in those days when he was at camp. But it really was more about him having practice being away from home.
You bet.
And I've known people who've even done it. That was say 5 nights, even one night a week, or one night going, a week, or one night a month, going to a caregiver's house, or going to, maybe grandma, aunt, whoever it is. It could be a paid person, right? It could be, I'm going to pay you to come to my house and we're going to go stay in a hotel. But whatever it is, it's like you could start at a pretty young age practicing them managing without you, and you being able to handle that. It's back to what you just said about the group. What about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, it's okay. And that's why you're only doing it for one night. How much can happen in one night? And we all have cell phones, right? But practice, build up. And that, I think, if you really were systematic about starting that young, and because think about everything that's happening in that little scenario. They're getting used to following directions from another person, not just their parent. The routine is going to shift a little. You're going to leave lots of instructions. You're going to leave your visual schedule. But it's still going to be a little different. And that is okay, because that is life. And flexibility, to me, like you mentioned, I don't think John's higher functioning than Michael. John is a little more flexible than Michael. Would be the biggest thing I think that makes him easier if it's easier. I think they're comparable in terms of intelligence, and their social skills are actually pretty close. Michael's way more coordinated than John, but John is pretty flexible, and that's some of it's just dumb luck, but we have worked on that. So that, I think, if for those of you who haven't even considered any of this, start there.
I absolutely agree. Trying to build flexibility into those routines. When Michael was growing up, we would take him to different places for family vacations, and he didn't always know what was going on. And sometimes it was a pretty heavy lift, but at least he got used to, spending a few days, at a ski resort, that had adaptive skiing like Cresta Butte, and they really took care of him. And it was, an ordeal just to get him dressed up in ski clothes, and then he had to go to the bathroom. You have to take everything off, but that kind of thing makes a big difference, so that when they do get older, they've already been exposed to staying someplace else and doing things that aren't part of their normal day-to-day routine. Now, the last slide, where to get more information. And again, this can be updated almost every week, probably.
Yeah. Another thing we're saying is, and this would be an ABA therapist would advise, like push their boundaries. Yep. Tiny bits at a time, right? Just a little bit. You're not taking them from, okay, this is how we do and throw them in this whole foreign situation and expect them to just handle it. Like, nobody would like that. I don't like that. But if you've been prepared and you've done some of the skills and built, and that takes a long time, I guess, is what we're both saying. That takes a long time. So the Thrive Parent Group is an online support group within the Autism Society. So I moderate an online group that's just statewide, all different people every month. It's on the fourth Wednesday morning. The Thrive group is another online support group that meets monthly. I think it's maybe third Wednesday in the evening. It's on the Autism Society of Texas website. And it's especially geared to parents of 18-year-olds and older. Really nice group, super knowledgeable bunch of parents. And then they sometimes plan get-togethers for themselves and also sometimes get-togethers for their sons and daughters, socials, which is kind of fun because that's how,
Oh, yeah.
a good way to make friends. I think they just had an outing at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center like a week or two ago. Texas Parent to Parent is another nonprofit, not autism specific, but they have a really good Pathways to Adulthood curriculum, basically, and then periodically they have workshops. So look at that. ARC of Texas, and you might have an ARC in your area, like we have the ARC of the capital area in Austin. That could be potentially a resource. This Housing Choices website, Susie found this. This is what HALE is, the Housing for Assisted and Independent Living. Navigate Life Texas is a really good website. It's a bear of a website. It is huge. So get ready to spend some time, or call me, I'll tell you how to navigate it. But it has a lot, navigate the navigating. But it's a very packed website that the state put together a few years back. If you're not familiar with your LIDA yet, it's Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority. You may have heard of it back in the day as MHMR, and we don't use MHMR, for obvious reasons anymore. But if that is in your head, that's what the LIDA is. One way or another, as you move into adult services and housing, you will be connected to your LIDA. So know that they're regional. So know at least minimum. Again, another assignment for today. If you don't know where your LIDA is, find out. And then this is just a skill, like an assessment you could do just to sort of see where your son or daughter is kind of in terms of independence, and it'll give you a picture of where they really need to work. I think that would be another reason I would, going back to our thing about, bringing other people into the mix, whether you're bringing people into your house or into, they're going to a different place and, working day programs. Schools should be working on this. But a lot of times, my experience, the parent-child dynamic is such that none of our kids, and I would include my 30-year-old daughter, they're not as independent when they're home with their parents as they are with somebody else. I mean, my daughter is highly accomplished. I'll just leave it at that. When she comes home, she lets her dad cook her dinner. She lets me do her laundry. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just too comfortable. It's just too comfortable. Right. And I don't say no. Because I'm her mom. So, that's just something to think about as you're thinking, because we talked about residential, but a big piece of residential is independence. And, be aware of yourself, be self-aware enough to know you might be, I know I have held John back in the independence department, and I've had to check myself.
Great comments. And Ann, I think you've just shared a wealth of knowledge and expertise. This very last slide, hopes, dreams, and encouragement.
Yeah.
Is that note of optimism, I think, that you wanted to leave parents with. So is there any closing remark that you'd like to make to anybody that's watching or listening to this?
Yeah, well, just start. Take that first step up Mount Everest. Network. Knowledge is power. I am someone who believes that knowledge is power, even if some of what you find out isn't what you wanted to know. It might, it crushes you a little bit, but it's still better to know. It's still better to know what you're dealing with. Use the resources you have, whatever that is, what your family has. Don't get bogged down in what you wish you had. Unless you're going to join forces, like, say Mike and Kay did, join forces with some other people, create your own thing. That's reasonable, and, or maybe connect with a new nonprofit and see if you can help them move along a little faster, something like that. But don't just let the fact that you have limited resources of any type stop you. Don't let it paralyze you that you don't have everything that you would like.
So thank you guys for listening and watching. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I'll be happy to get Ann involved too. You can reach me at mike@autismlabs.com. And of course, Ann's very active in the Autism Society of Texas. Yeah. Has been for years. So Ann, thanks again. And thank you everyone for watching. And